Every single place Jesus walked, every town, every road, every shoreline, is on a map you can open right now on your phone. And I'm not talking about general regions or approximate areas. I'm talking about specific locations, specific streets, specific rooms. And when I started going through them one by one, looking at what was actually found at each site, I couldn't stop. So that's what this video is. We're going through every major location of the ministry of Jesus in order. And I'm going to show you what's still there. Because there is more to it than I ever realized. And I think once you see it, you're going to feel the same way. Let's start where the story starts. The first thing that surprised me about Bethlehem is how small it actually was. We talk about Bethlehem like it's a significant place, and it is now because of what happened there. But in the 1st century BC, this was a farming village of maybe a few hundred people, 6 miles south of Jerusalem, sitting on a limestone ridge. No army, no trade route, no reason for anyone outside the immediate area to know it existed. And yet here's what I couldn't get past. 700 years before Jesus was born, a prophet named Micah wrote down the name of this town. Not Jerusalem, not any major city. Bethlehem. Micah 5:2. The birthplace of a coming ruler, named by name, 7 centuries early. Now, I know what some people will say about that, but here's what I found interesting, regardless of where you land on the prophecy side of things. The Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem today sits over a site that has been continuously identified since the 2nd century AD. And the reason that identification survived is actually because of someone who wanted to destroy it. Emperor Hadrian, who hated Christianity, built a pagan grove directly over the site to erase it. And what he accidentally did was mark the location so clearly that when Constantine's mother, Helena, arrived in 326 AD, everyone still knew exactly where to go. Hadrian had been pointing at it for 2 centuries. I find that almost funny. The person who tried hardest to erase the location ended up being the reason it survived. The grotto is still there. The site has been visited continuously for over 1,700 years. Nazareth. This next location genuinely surprised me, because I had no idea there was ever a serious question about whether Nazareth even existed. When Nathanael, one of Jesus' future disciples, heard that Jesus came from Nazareth, his response was, "Can anything good come from that place?" That wasn't just an insult about the town's reputation. That was a reaction to how completely unknown it was. Nazareth doesn't appear in the Old Testament. It doesn't appear in Josephus' extensive list of Galilean towns. It appears in no Roman record of any kind before the Gospels. So for a long time, skeptics used that as an argument. No historical record means no town. Maybe the whole thing was invented. Then archaeologist Yardena Alexandre started digging beneath the modern city. And what her team found was a 1st century village. Agricultural terraces cut into bedrock, wine presses, storage pits, domestic structures, dated by pottery to exactly the period the Gospels describe. Too small for Roman records, too poor for historians, but absolutely, undeniably there. And here's the detail I didn't expect. Nazareth sits in a natural bowl in the Galilean hills, enclosed on 3 sides, invisible from the valleys below. And at the edge of that bowl is a cliff, a 40-meter drop. Luke chapter 4 says the people of Nazareth tried to throw Jesus off the brow of the hill their town was built on. That hill is still there. The drop is still 40 meters. It's called the Mount of Precipitation. You can stand at the top of it today. I don't know why I never thought about the fact that cliff was a real place, but it is. The Jordan River. This is where the public ministry begins, and I'll be honest. Before I looked into this properly, I assumed the baptism site was basically unknown. Too long ago. Too many centuries of change. I was wrong about that. For years, there were two competing sites, one on the Jordanian side of the river, one on the Israeli side, both claiming to be the location. And then, in 1996, a Jordanian archaeological team, led by Mohammed Wahib, started digging at a site called Wadi al-Qarar. What they found was a complex of Byzantine churches and baptismal pools, built over earlier remains, and pilgrim accounts going back to the 4th century describing this exact location as the place. On the Israeli side, directly opposite, is Qasr al-Yahud. Both sites, same stretch of river. And here's what got me about this. The Jordan at this point is not impressive. It's maybe 20 to 30 meters across in dry season. Green-brown, quiet. You would drive past it without a second look if you didn't know. But Josephus, the Jewish historian writing for a Roman audience with zero reason to promote any of this, confirms John the Baptist by name, records his preaching, records his execution by Herod Antipas, notes that people believed Herod's later military defeat was divine punishment for killing him. A historian writing for Rome doesn't invent a minor desert preacher. John was real enough that his death was still politically significant decades afterward. This is the water, right here. The Judean wilderness. After the baptism, Jesus goes into the desert for 40 days. And I want to show you what that actually looks like, because I think we seriously underestimate it. The Judean wilderness is 1,500 square kilometers of cracked white limestone, deep ravines, and silence. In summer, the temperature exceeds 45 degrees Celsius. There's almost no water. There's no shade. It is genuinely one of the harshest environments in the Middle East. The traditional site of the temptation is a cliff above ancient Jericho, called the Mount of Temptation. A Greek Orthodox monastery has been clinging to that cliff face since the 6th century. Today, there's a cable car to the top. And when you see what the view looks like from up there, the entire Jordan Valley below you, the Dead Sea to the south, the hills of modern Jordan in the distance, something about Luke's account hits differently. He says Jesus was shown all the kingdoms of the world from a high place. Stand on that cliff and you get it immediately. The geography makes the scene make sense in a way it never does when you're just reading it. 40 days, no food. In this landscape, I think we read past that too quickly. Sea of Galilee. After the wilderness, the story moves to water. And this is where I want to show you something that I think is one of the most remarkable finds connected to this entire journey. The Sea of Galilee sits 213 meters below sea level, the lowest freshwater lake in the world. The hills around it funnel wind down onto the surface without warning. Fishermen on this lake have always known that a calm morning can become a dangerous storm within hours. That was true in the 1st century. It's true now. Jesus chose this lake as his base of operations, not Jerusalem, a working fishing lake in the north. And that starts to make sense when you understand what was here. Customs posts, trade routes, Roman garrisons, fish markets, the full cross-section of the Roman world on one shoreline. But here's the thing I want you to see. In 1986, a drought dropped the water level of the lake. Two brothers, Moshe and Yuval Lufin, were walking the exposed mud on the northwestern shore when they spotted the outline of a boat. They called archaeologist Shelley Waxman. What came out of the mud over the next 11 days was a fishing vessel, 8.2 meters long, 2.3 meters wide. Carbon dated to between 100 BC and 70 AD. The wood was so fragile from 2,000 years in the sediment that it took 7 more years of conservation before it could be displayed publicly. It sits today at the Yigal Allon Museum at Kibbutz Ginosar. You can walk around it, look at its construction, understand its scale. I keep thinking about the fact that this boat was sitting in the mud of that lake the entire time, through every century. every war, every change of ruler and religion and language over the land above it, just sitting there, until the water level dropped in 1986 and two brothers happened to be walking past. Capernaum. Follow the northern shoreline east and you reach Capernaum. The Gospels call it his own city, the place Jesus moved to after Nazareth. And I think Capernaum is one of the most underappreciated locations in this entire story, because it wasn't a quiet fishing village. It sat on the Via Maris, the ancient highway connecting Egypt to Damascus and Mesopotamia. Every major trade caravan in the region passed through here. Matthew was collecting customs on this road when Jesus walked past. Walk through the ruins today and you come to a white limestone synagogue, 4th century, but it's sitting on an earlier foundation, black basalt, 1st century. When archaeologist Virgilio Corbo examined the coins found between the two layers in the 1960s and 70s, the lower foundation dated directly to the period of Jesus. The floor he walked on when he taught here, and the crowd said, "This man teaches differently," with authority. But here's the part of Capernaum that I wasn't prepared for. 50 meters from that synagogue is a house. A Byzantine octagonal church was built over it. And the octagonal form was reserved specifically for sites of special sanctity. When Corbo's team went beneath the church floor, they found a 1st century domestic structure that had been changed in a very specific way. The walls plastered over and over. Everyday objects replaced by oil lamps, and scratched into that plaster in Greek, Aramaic, Syriac, and Latin, names of Jesus, prayers, written by people who visited within living memory of the events and believed they were standing in Peter's house. A modern protective structure with a glass floor sits over the site now. You can look directly down through it at that plaster, at that writing. I don't know exactly how to describe what that feels like, but it's not nothing. The Mount of Beatitudes. Just up from the northern shore of the lake, a gentle slope rises above the water. A church built in 1938 marks the traditional site of the Sermon on the Mount at the top. But before you even get to the church, stop on the slope and face the lake. The hill forms a natural amphitheater. And this has actually been tested. A person standing at the top, speaking at a completely normal conversational volume, can be heard clearly at the base of the slope. No microphone, no amplification. The shape of the hill carries the sound. So a crowd of thousands sitting on this hillside on a morning in 28 AD could have heard every single word without the speaker raising his voice. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Those words were spoken once on a real hillside to real people sitting on real grass, looking out at a real lake. And the hill is still there. The view is still there. The acoustics are still there. Sit on that slope today, and you're looking at the exact same water they were looking at. Caesarea Philippi. I want to show you a location that most people have never heard of, because when you see it, one of the most famous conversations in the Gospels hits you in a completely different way. North of Galilee, the road climbs toward the base of Mount Hermon. The landscape changes, greener, colder, wilder. At the base of the mountain, powerful springs push out of the rock and form the headwaters of the Jordan River. The ancient city here was called Caesarea Philippi. Today, it's a national park called Banias in the Golan Heights. And when you arrive, the first thing you see is a massive cliff face with a deep cave cut into it. The ancient world believed the underworld started in that cave. They called it the Gates of Hades. The Greeks built a temple to Pan directly in front of it. The Romans added a temple to Caesar. This was one of the most concentrated centers of pagan worship in the entire region. And this is the exact location where Jesus turns to his disciples and asks, "Who do you say I am?" Peter answers, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." He said that while standing in front of a cave, literally called the gates of Hades. That is not a coincidence. That is a deliberate choice. And I genuinely don't think you can fully hear those words until you've seen where they were spoken. The cave is still open. The cliff is still there. The springs still run cold from the base of the rock. Bethany and the tomb of Lazarus. 2 miles east of Jerusalem, on the slope of the Mount of Olives, is a village called Bethany. And what happens here is the moment the story shifts into its final chapter. John chapter 11. Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead 4 days after his burial. In public, in front of witnesses, 2 miles from Jerusalem. Days before Passover, when the city is already packed with pilgrims from across the empire. John doesn't present this as a quiet, private moment. He presents it as the event that forces a decision. The religious leadership calls an emergency council immediately afterward. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. The decision to kill him is made right here, within walking distance of this tomb. The tomb has been identified at a site in the modern village of al-Eizariya. That Arabic name is a version of Lazarium. The Latin name, Byzantine pilgrims, gave the location in the 4th century. Eusebius records it as already well known in his time. A church stood over it by 333 AD, because a pilgrim described visiting it that year. The tomb is there today. You enter through a low doorway, descend a staircase, and stand in a small stone chamber cut from the rock. From this village, Jerusalem is a 45-minute walk over the crest of the Mount of Olives. He made that walk, knowing what was on the other side. Jerusalem, the final week. Come over the ridge of the Mount of Olives, and Jerusalem opens below you. The Temple Mount fills the view. Even now, standing on that ridge, you understand immediately why everything leads here. The entry into the city came down this slope, through the Kidron Valley. That route is still walkable. That valley is still there. And the Temple Mount itself is still there. The western wall is the retaining wall of Herod's platform. And some of those stones weigh 570 tons. They haven't moved in 2,000 years. Here's the detail that stayed with me. At the southern end of the Temple Mount, archaeologist Benjamin Mazar led decades of work from 1968 onward and uncovered the original entrance steps. Wide limestone stairs, built with deliberately irregular depths, so worshippers couldn't rush, had to slow down, had to approach intentionally. Those stairs are still there, same stone. You can walk up them today. Every Passover pilgrim in the 1st century climbed these steps. Jesus climbed these steps multiple times. I don't know why that detail hits me the way it does, but it does. Gethsemane. Cross the Kidron Valley from the eastern wall, and you're at the Garden of Gethsemane. The name in Aramaic means oil press. Olive trees grew here in the 1st century, as they do now. The trees in the garden were carbon dated in 2012 by a team led by Italian researcher Antonio Cimado. The results came back between 900 and 1200 AD. Ancient, but not 1st century. However, olive trees regenerate from their roots. The root systems beneath these trees may reach much further back than anything visible above the ground. It's impossible to say for certain. But here's the detail about this garden that I keep coming back to. From where you're standing, looking west across the Kidron Valley, the entire eastern wall of the Temple Mount is directly in front of you. Torchlight moving from the temple complex down into the valley toward the garden would have been visible from here long before the soldiers arrived. He saw them coming. He stayed anyway. Golgotha, the route through the old city to the crucifixion site, passes through streets that are still streets, through a market that is still a market, through a city that has never once stopped being lived in. The site is marked today by the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And here's the part of this location's history I find the most striking. When Constantine's engineers arrived in 325 AD, they demolished a temple to Venus that Emperor Hadrian had built here in 135 AD. Same pattern as Bethlehem. Hadrian tried to erase the site and ended up preserving its location instead. Beneath the Venus temple, they found a rock outcropping and a tomb. That rock outcropping is still visible inside the church today, about 5 meters high. When archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon mapped Jerusalem's ancient city walls in the 1960s, her work confirmed this location sat outside the 1st century city boundary, which matters because Roman law required executions outside city limits. 1st century tombs have been found nearby. The site fits every historical and archaeological requirement. 3 major Christian denominations share custody of this building and have disputed the arrangement for centuries. The current agreement governing who controls which corridor on which day was formally established in 1853 and is still in force. Underneath all of that, the centuries of argument, the layers of architecture, the competing claims is 1st century bedrock. The rock is still there. The tomb is still there. When I started pulling all of this together, I honestly didn't expect the physical evidence to be this consistent. The Pool of Bethesda, dismissed as symbolic for centuries, found in 1888 exactly where John described it, with exactly the 5 porticos John described. The Pontius Pilate inscription turned up at Caesarea Maritima in 1961 by Antonio Frova's team. The 1st century boat sitting in the mud of the Sea of Galilee for 2,000 years, until a drought and 2 brothers happened to cross paths with it in 1986. Location by location, the geography of these accounts holds up. And I think that means something. The coordinates for every site in this video are in the description below. Go and look for yourself, because the ground has been holding this story for 2,000 years, and it's not letting go.